Welcome to the Equity Team Podcast, where we provide Sedona, Arizona real estate insight to help you thrive during your next real estate transaction.
Today we have Anthony Selna, who is the managing broker at both the Sedona and the Cottonwood Yavapai title agency offices. Anthony, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. And Anthony and also, of course, Yavapai title, we've worked together for many years, closed a lot of transactions through Yavapai title, under the guidance and the tutelage of Anthony, and you've always done an amazing job, which is why we just keep working with you over and over and over again.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to work with you. So Anthony, there are a lot of things that, I always trust your opinion and your perspective on things because you're like me, you're deep in the trenches on what's going on, constantly learning new things and constantly just busy. I mean, just productively busy. So, it's the people that are always really, really busy being productive that tend to be learning the most.
Absolutely.
And so, as far as when there are changes in different HOAs or whatever is going on, then you're usually my first call on that kind of thing.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about is, I've been hearing more and more about land scams that are kind of surfacing. And not to spend too much time on that, but do you mind kind of explaining what's going on with these land scams and what does it mean to buyers and what does it mean to sellers?
Yeah, unfortunately, fraud is on the rise, both vacant land type deals, wire fraud. Fraud is just kind of one of those things that they're getting more and more clever and they're trying different angles and we do everything we can to mitigate that and stop that before it even turns into a thing. But to hit on the vacant land part, what they're kind of doing is they're focusing on vacant land parcels and kind of pretending to be the seller and getting some information and then kind of opening escrow and trying to kind of push a fast close, kind of keeping everybody, seeing if they can get people off their game and then they end up closing and then we title insure the property, cut out the proceeds, and then people are out tons of money. And so it's kind of a crazy thing. Things to look out for. I mean, obviously, like you can always come to us for background on different properties.
Mhm.
We're kind of on the forefront of all of this nonsense, and so we invest a lot of time and energy and money to dive in to figure out what's cooking. But on the vacant lot side of things, it's pretty prevalent, and so it's something that does need to be talked about. They're kind of, like I said, just focusing on those types of transactions and trying to push things through and hoping to sell that property fraudulently, and then they get the money and the title company's out, the buyer's out because then they don't have the property, and then the real seller's sitting there scratching their head saying, "What the heck's going on? I was never even a part of this transaction to begin with."
Yeah.
And it's a big thing.
And a lot of these scams that are happening, it's anonymous funds. I mean, the money is going somewhere and it can't be traced. And so once that money is gone, it's gone. It doesn't matter if you're law enforcement or you're an attorney or Uncle Lenny with a baseball bat or whatever. I mean, you can't find them. You can't find the money.
Right.
It's just, there's nothing tied to reality once that money is gone. So it's a real scary thing.
Exactly. When the money's gone, those things are gone. So we do everything we can to kind of stay in the forefront of those things. We look for a telltale sign. We're on the up and up as far as the latest and greatest. We look for, in particular, you mentioned, well, when the wire's gone, the money's gone. Where's the money going? So we're taking a look and seeing where the supposed seller wants those funds to go, and they need to go to the owner of record. And so if they're saying, hey, we're entering into this, and supposedly, the tax bill is sent to a Florida address, but now they want proceeds sent to Vietnam. Well, I would say that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah.
So we're kind of looking into those types of things, and those are some of the things that we see. We see addresses not mixing, appropriately. We see funds wanting to be wired in different areas, and so we just kind of have to be mindful of those things. That's one thing that from the title side we're looking at.
Anthony, let's talk about something that's very similar, but it's actually even more of a scary monster. And it's something that the good news on this is it's easier to protect ourselves. Let's talk about wire fraud a little bit. So wire fraud it truly is. I mean, it's this scary monster, and it's a problem that's not going to go away. It's a problem that's I think it's going to continue to get worse. And we're going to be hearing about bigger and bigger dollar signs that are disappearing and gone forever with wire fraud. So, for our viewers, the short version on wire fraud is it's basically these scammers are, and feel free to argue with me, tell me I'm wrong, or Chad, you're silly, or whatever it is. But, because as always, I just appreciate that when people are straight with me. But wire fraud is when we have these scammers that basically they're watching the emails go back and forth. So they hijack an email and they're watching back and forth. And then when it feels like the right time, they're emailing either the buyers, the sellers, or both. And they're saying, it's so urgent, it looks like it's coming straight from the title company or straight from the agent that they're working with. And so it's actually going to say, like, from Chad McMahon, you got to get this money over to, you got to wire this over to this account. Here's the account number, the routing number, send this dollar amount. You got to send this right away. It's super urgent. Or it'll say coming from Anthony Selna with Yavapai Title Agency, or whatever it is. And it looks 100% legitimate, even for people that are savvy enough to click on the right places to see where it's coming from. It's coming from the right email address. They wire the money and it's gone. And it's a super scary thing. And this is something, do you have a clue? Are you up on in terms of how much money is being lost with wire fraud? I mean, it's a huge number.
An actual figure, but it is substantial, and it's in the unfortunate side of it is on the wire fraud end. It is avoidable. It's just they are getting more and more clever. To that point, you're correct in saying that they're kind of hijacking emails and they're looking into it. And what they're doing is they don't focus on us because they know that we have all the high-end encryption. They know that we're on the lookout for it. We're in the industry. We're professionals in what we do, and so we're on the up and up with all the latest and greatest as far as their procedures go for intercepting and doing all that stuff. But what we see them doing is ultimately, they'll make a random email account that says Anthony.Selna@Yavapai@hotmail.com, for example. And so there's those little tweaks to make it, they try to make it look as legitimate as possible, but there are little indicators there because all of our email domains obviously are going to be at YavaPaiTitle.com. And so that's one game that they play. They'll make a fake email account. They do the timing thing where they're intercepting those emails and kind of looking on, because the people that we're working with are using Yahoo and Hotmail and Gmail and all these things that their encryption isn't as high end as ours. And so they break in on that side, monitor things. And then, like you're saying, when they think it's go time, they're going to hit them hard and try to pretend that there's somebody that they're not and change those wiring instructions and do everything. So what we need to do is make sure that we're in constant communication with everybody and, making sure that if you're getting weird emails or you feel like you're getting undue pressure or all of this stuff, you need to be reaching out to your agents and reaching out to the title company, to Yavapai Title, and saying, hey, like, what's going on? You said I could bring in a cashier's check, and now all of a sudden you're saying it has to be wire instructions, and they're now changed, and it has to happen now. And so we kind of just need to use a little bit of common sense and just kind of coming back down to earth, because the buying process and selling process can be a heightened emotional situation. Things are coming and going really quickly, so we just need to make sure that we take time to smell the roses, so to speak. Let's not rush things and make sure we do everything appropriately.
Yeah. If there's just like one simple thing that anyone and everyone could do to 100% protect them from wire fraud, what's the one simple thing?
Oh man, communication. Easy. That's the easiest question in the world. Communication. You call me. If you're getting wire instructions, anytime you get wire instructions, you're calling that source. So if we're dealing with proceeds, let's say we're wiring, $1 million to the seller, well, you can be sure that we're going to be calling and verbally verifying those instructions on the phone, because we're going to guarantee those funds get there.
Yeah.
We're going to be wiring out all willy-nilly. Nobody else should do it. So the biggest thing you can do is communicate, call, verbally verify, and make sure you're to date with all the stuff that's going on with instructions themselves. And then just having that open line of communication is going to stamp it out.
Yeah. Yeah, always verbally confirm with the source. That's exactly right. And I mean, this may sound silly, but it's important, I think, to at least just voice this, that if in the email, you know, it says urgent, send this stuff, or, you know, if in that same email it has a contact number, you don't call that contact number. I mean, you call the real contact number, you know, independently.
Right.
And if you can't find the contact info, you know, either check with your agent, or, you know, you can always look online and you could, you know, find, you know, Anthony Selna's Yavapai title and find the phone number and you can call, and that's a safe way to do it also.
Right. Right.
But yeah, this wire fraud thing, it's becoming more and more common.
It's absolutely crazy. And they're getting clever and they're working in every angle they can to take your money. They don't care about you. They want your money.
Yeah, that's right.
They're bad about taking it.
So the next thing I'd love to chat about is seller concessions. And, you know, it's a misunderstood thing, I think, by a lot of people, and even a lot of real estate agents, you know, kind of have these misconceptions about seller concessions. I'm a huge fan. I think that seller concessions they're a really valuable tool that can benefit both parties. And it's a great way to kind of put things into the box that you need it to be so that it works. So just for our viewers that they understand, there's a part of the purchase contract that addresses seller concessions. And ADRE, Arizona Department of Real Estate, they make it really easy. And they just say, you know, what seller concessions does the buyer want, either percentage of the purchase price or a flat dollar amount. The one thing that's really important to know is that two things. One is there are a lot of sellers and there are a lot of listing agents that are not as savvy and they're not as creative thinkers. You know, they're used to the old school way of doing things, which had pretty much no seller concessions. So if you get dealt a bad hand and they're not comfortable with seller concessions, then you probably won't be able to utilize them. But it is becoming more and more common. The other thing is that most lenders have a maximum seller concessions. So anytime you're talking with your agent about seller concessions, of course, we do it automatically because we just work with this all the time, but make sure that your agent checks with the lender or you check with your lender and see what their cap is so that you're not getting into a contract that's above and beyond what they allow, because that's a problem.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's something that can be, we're seeing more and more of seller concessions on the rise, given the interest rate environment that we're in.
That's right.
And we're seeing a lot more negotiation in that angle as far as the seller giving a little bit of money to make sure the deal goes through, given the circumstances that we're in. So they're definitely being utilized and more so now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, getting, you know, seller concessions are pretty largely responsible for still, even now, being able to get interest rates down into the 5s or even sometimes into the 4s. And that's by, you know, maybe you get 3% or even 5 or 8%. The most I've done is 8% seller concessions. And it really brought down that interest rate. And it got an interest rate from, gosh, it was in the 6s down into the upper 4s, I think. Wow. And sessions thing for buyers. And usually, just FYI for our viewers, usually the lender requirement is right around, their cap is usually about 2 or 3% seller concessions. But there are some that obviously, if I was doing 8%, that's a different lender and they had a higher cap. So, right. Cool. Now, you know, I've been seeing, especially with a lot of the DSCR lenders, but also some out-of-state lenders and some other causes too. I've been seeing a lot of close of escrow delays. And a lot of this it's avoidable unless the lender is playing games and kind of making a monster out of things that shouldn't be there. But what are you seeing? I mean, you're in the deep of it. So what are you seeing on close of escrow delays? How can we kind of avoid them?
I mean, from the lending standpoint, the best thing that we can do is, I mean, to that end, yes, what we're seeing on the delay aspect is going to be out-of-state lenders, people maybe not familiar with the Arizona lending process as much as you might have with the local lender. But we're seeing that maybe some unorthodox practices, maybe something that's standard or even unorthodox for where they're at, but it's definitely unorthodox in Arizona. The best thing that you can do is maybe have those communications with lending up front. I've found that maybe having three-way calls with the lending and the agents and escrow kind of can help things out as far as kind of smoothing out that process. We have experienced some very interesting methodology in some of the lesser active lenders or out-of-state lenders that do cause close escrow delays by a day, or heaven forbid, I mean, we've seen them over a week, to where they're just not, the communication's not really there. Their general business practice on the lending side is very different, and it's just, they're accustomed to something different than how we do business in Arizona, and thereby, they think sometimes through ignorance or sometimes through no fault of their own, they're finding themselves delaying escrow. So on the lending side, that open line of communication, making sure that they understand, where everything sits, because that's from the escrow side of stuff. That's what we're doing. Hey, lender, here's our fund date, the close dates, whatever date it is, like this is what we're going towards, and understanding that we have to have those originals. Everybody has to have, have it signed, or we need the fund in our account, all of the general Arizona practices that maybe they're not accustomed to. And so just making sure that everybody's on the straight and narrow there.
Good. Now, what are some, I know that there are a lot of ways that you can kind of mess things up, and you can have extra unnecessary costs for buyers and sellers. What are some things that you see from the inside and behind the curtain? What are some things that buyers and sellers what can they do to eliminate these unnecessary expenses?
Again, it's kind of, everything really boils down to two things, in my opinion. One, it's educate. So knowing what you're doing, knowing what you're getting yourself into, and having proper representation. And two is communication. And so what we find is that, maybe people they haven't looked into the property itself, and they don't know what costs are associated with it. And so overall, not having the understanding of the property that you're entered into a contract, I think that's where we find those unexpected expenditures. And so you're going to be talking HOA stuff. You're going to be talking, for example, a vacant land parcel that's close enough proximity to a municipality. Well, you would think the buyer might not understand that, there's going to be a monthly sewer charge to that vacant lot. They may think that it's just a vacant lot and there's going to be no cost until they go to build in the future. It's not necessarily the case. And so not knowing that ahead of time, well, then, you're going to have your monthly sewer statement to that parcel that you weren't expecting. Now, is that going to break the bank? No, but it is an unexpected expenditure. So that's an ongoing expense that's not going to go away, and so that just comes inherent with the lot, for example. But those types of things, and then just kind of not maybe doing that proper due diligence ahead of time. There may be some liens on the property that agents can do a listing kit on, and that we can supply, and they can look at and see, okay, well, if your seller is saying there's no liens, but there's a deed of trust out there, well, not only does that potentially cost more to the seller, but you're talking about potential escrow delay. And so everything kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Okay, good deal. So a lot of our, as a lot of our clients are investors, and a lot of our viewers on the podcast and YouTube channels are investors. And I know that you work with investors, tons of them every day. What are some things that you guys do? I mean, we love working with you, and we know that you really take care of our clients. But what are some things specifically that you guys do for investors?
Yeah, so as we do work constantly on the investor side of stuff, we want to make sure that we tailor our business to every type of business that we can do, and doing it in a manner that's, we see the agents, the investors, everybody when we're grocery shopping at the store. We want to make sure that we put it forward always.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we do offer for investors would be listing kits. So you can order a listing kit that's going to have some information general about the properties. You already know ahead of time, that's free of charge. That's going to tell you if there's a deed of trust on the property. It kind of gives you an idea of what's happening. We can provide you CC&Rs. So if you're looking to do some sort of short-term rental, for example, is one that is easy to to bring up, those CCNRs are going to outline whether that's even allowable in the subdivision the property's in. So providing those CCNRs. We have wonderful investor rates to reduce the cost of the investors out of pocket for their purchase. And then moreover, one of the coolest things is that we're a title agency. That means that we work with a multitude of underwriters. And so First American, TRG, Old Republic for a couple, and we have multiple of other ones as well, but we can kind of tailor to the transaction for different types of reasons, whether it's for ease of transaction, whether it's lower cost, we can kind of shop around and we have the opportunity to work with multiple underwriters versus someone that is only stuck to one specific underwriter. And so we have that ability to kind of make it as smooth as a process, as inexpensive as possible, things like that, that really hammer home convenience.
Yeah. One really quick thing that I want to end with is, especially right now, with interest rates being higher right now, they're starting to come down, but they're higher than what we've been used to for years and years, taken for granted for years and years and years. So we're seeing a few more seller carries, where the seller becomes the bank and they carry the financing for 5 years, 10 years, even 30 years. And one thing a lot of people don't know is that you guys can actually be hired pretty cheaply, and usually it's at the cost of the buyer, pretty cheaply to process those payments, the collections. And that way the seller is not in the collections business. You guys are. You guys collect that funds, onto the seller.
Right. So it is a very handy tool to use, especially on the investor side of stuff, or in the instance where you're just looking to own or carry. Maybe you have a buyer in mind that for whatever reason interest rates are higher, or they don't qualify, or they're just saying, down with the institutional lender, don't want to deal with it. Like, let's do an own or carry. Well, we have the loan servicing department to do that, and so it's a nice little thing where we do that. We do the transaction, and then we set up their account servicing. They agree upon the terms like they would just regularly as far as the loan goes.
Mm-hmm.
The buyer, we close, the buyer gives us the money, and then we process that and kick the money out to the seller. And so then the seller is not necessarily chasing down those payments. It just kind of happens naturally. And so it's a really cool and very inexpensive service that we can provide.
Yeah, I want to say it's like $20 or $30 a month or something, or maybe it's even less than that.
Even less than that. It depends, of course, the type of servicing we're doing, whether it's just a standard note or if there's going to be impounds for tax and insurance, which increases it slightly, but still very, very inexpensive.
Good. Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Anthony. Always appreciate you, and it's awesome to have you on here. And we'll definitely pick your brain again, in future episodes. Love to have you back. So Anthony Sauna, Yavapai Title Agency. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone else, and have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Equity Team Podcast. To speak with one of our top agents, visit us at owninaz.com. That's owninaz.com, or call us at 928-323-0031.